Welcome to Duck Rabbit Goose, the podcast where we compare and contrast two different board games that have an element in common and see where that discussion takes us. This episode is being recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge the land was never ceded. Your hosts are myself, Jarrod, and James.
Hi.
And today we'll be talking about The Mind and Sky Team, two games which have silence as their common element.
I thought, Jarrod, that we'd start by talking about the mechanism of silence itself, because that's the mechanism that these two games share.
Have you found, in preparing for this episode, James, it's hard not to have the Simon and Garfunkel song Sound of Silence running in your head?
I hadn't thought about that.
Oh.
I hadn't thought about that. Okay, but now
Welcome to my daughter.
That's going to be... something I have been thinking about, though, Jarrod, is that lots of games could be played in silence, technically. So in our last episode, we talked about Dominion. And when you play Dominion, you actually don't need to verbalise what you do, really. You could do all of your moves, and everyone could do all of their moves in silence. But the reason that we often explain our moves in games or talk through our moves, I think, is because we want external validation. We want to prove that we're following the rules. And I guess because board games are social in nature. So then I was thinking, well, what does it mean then when silence is actually a key part of the game? And I thought, this is what I came up with, and I'm interested in your thoughts about what I've got to say, Jarrod. I think it really means that there needs to be no table talk when you need to make a decision that will impact on how others play or participate in the game. So when I was playing The Mind and Sky Team, preparing for this podcast, I thought a lot about cooperative trick taking games. So the crew, but also like 500. In 500, you've got a partner and you've got a shared goal. You want to win more tricks than the other partnership. And once the hand begins, you need to do that silently. You can't talk about what cards you've got. So when you play your card and you do that silently, that has an impact on your partner's strategy. So that was the definition I ended up coming up with. Silence means that your decision making silently will have some type of impact on other people in the game. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
What drew me to this mechanism was that contrast between there's games where the rule against table talk is not a new concept, and gaming in general, one of the things I like about board games is the social experience, and that could be, the board gaming equivalent of trash talk. Yeah, that could be the negotiation of a trading game. But when you play a game where there are communication restrictions, which is the way some of the ratings and resources websites categorize the games we talk about today, it's constitutive of the gameplay itself. Yeah, which is counterintuitive. Yeah, and that's why I think it's interesting when we want to think about what a game does in the experience, why it's interesting and fun, and what it might say about the human experience or the society that it's come from. I thought that it's interesting to play a game in such a noisy era that's based on staying silent. Yeah, and it certainly led me to think I've got a whole range of things to say later on in section 3 about so what, about the social implications it raised for me by being silent during the game. And you're right to point to classic playing card games where there's communication restrictions on what you can say, how you react, and that leads to great playing group traditions around. Second player plays low. It's part of the known world of the game. And other immediate examples, again, going to parlor games and card games like charades. It's part of the game that the player who's giving the clues can't say what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they have ways of communicating.
I think that's a really significant point, and I want to return to that later on, because you use the phrase there, limitations on communication. And it's actually silence is part of the game, but returning to play these games over the last few weeks, I realised that I kind of, because I hadn't played them for a while, I had this idea in my head that you have to be silent the whole time. But of course you can communicate during the games. It's just that there is silence at certain points. And just like in 500, you can talk between rounds, but once the hand begins, you can't talk.
And perhaps thinking about the mind, because when it came out in 2018, very buzzy at the time, and part of the excitement of the mind is the emphasis on silence within the game phase. So if you haven't played the mind, the best way to describe it is up to 4 players, best in that 3 or 4 range, a deck of 100 cards, numbered 1 to 100, and literally all you're doing is taking turns playing your cards face up into the middle of the table without talking and trying to get them to be in ascending order. Sounds really simple.
In fact, I remember you saying to me, Jarrod, when we first played this game a long time ago, you said one of the questions was, is it actually a game?
It is, because it's a cooperative experience. And so, I mean, co-op games aren't games. I think we've come around to that now in more modern gaming. But it is very much a shared experience of a game rather than other more straightforward exercises. And I think when we talk about the role of silence in the game, it's a case where really respecting those rules and accepting those rules as part of the gameplay adds to the value of it.
Yes, I certainly found, but playing the games over the last few weeks, that respecting the rules was a really important part of the game, because I always sneakily want to talk or something like that, but it makes it less fun, and other people really want that experience of you need to do it properly and be quiet, because that's what makes the experience.
How does that work in Sky Team?
In Sky Team, there are 2 players, a pilot and a co-pilot, who are working together to land a plane. And to me, replaying this game over the last few weeks, it reminded me a lot of a trick-taking game, which is why I kind of talked about that earlier. Because in Sky Team, you need to control the various elements of the plane to land it by placing dice. You've each got 4 dice. You roll them each round. You have 7 rounds to land a plane, and you need to silently make a decision about where you place a dice. And the values are important, and the sequence in which you do it is important. And that's, for me, that reminded me a lot of trick taking. You need to kind of work out what your priorities are in placing the dice, and you kind of need to be in sync or have a sense of what kind of dice your partner might have. So yeah, it's a partnership cooperative game. A few kind of interesting things about Sky Team, Jarrod, is that it ranks 32 on Board Game Geek, and overall, and that this was a real eye opener for me. And for those of you listening, you're thinking, well, ranks 32 overall, why is that such a big deal? Well, the big deal is that there's about 150,000 board games on Board Game Geek,
and about 44,000 get into the ranking. So a game needs to have 30 registered users provide a ranking for it to get an official rating.
Yeah.
So to be in the top 30 is quite.
So that really blew me away, because I don't know what I expected, but 32 is really high, and for family games it's number 2.
Oh.
Yeah, and that also really surprised me, because it's a two-player game. I would have thought a family game would be your classic 4-player game.
I wonder if the definition of family game that Board Game Geek uses is in that medium weight game, rather than in a good for family group. It's just more in the party category, perhaps.
Yeah,
or overlapping as they always do these categories. Where do you think the Mind came in on Board Game Geek's overall ranking?
I'm going to say it's outside the 100 mark. I'm going to go around the 800.
Yep, I was surprised it's at 400.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why I then dug up 400 out of how many?
Yeah.
Top 104 party games.
Yep.
And the average user rating is, I think, 6.7. Which 6 is, I liked it, I'd play it if it's happening. 7 is, I would often choose to play this game.
Yeah. Well, SkyTeam has a user rating of 8.1, which kind of bears out the 32 ranking. So it's high. But that kind of goes against my own preference. I'd rather play the Mind than SkyTeam, but I think people like SkyTeam's got a bit more complexity going on. I like the simplicity of the Mind, and also that you can play it with a bigger group.
And as is often the case with the more famous games, we're splitting hairs. I think certainly the Mind was a Game of the Year nominee in the Spiel des Jahres category and winner of many categories. You can never take the publisher's numbers as gospel, but over 3 million copies sold. Certainly, they're both well regarded.
Interesting question, because so we're sharing some facts here, and I've got an interesting one for you, Jarrod. Well, not a fact, but so much as a question for you. Is the advertised recommended age for SkyTeam is 14 plus. And when I was kind of putting together the facts for this podcast, I kind of put that down because it kind of made me think of like, why 14 plus? Like how do board game publishers come up with the recommended age? Like, I would have thought I'd be pretty comfortable playing this with primary school kids, like someone from year 5 or year 6. Like 14 plus seemed to me like a fairly high age. When I think 14 plus, I think some type of 3-hour, kind of complicated game with lots of parts, not SkyTeam. So
I will guess that's about predicting potential market. If that the number on the side of the box is for people who walk into the shop looking to buy a present.
Yeah.
And is helping the sales assistant feel confident that they're not going to overpitch. And certainly, as we'll probably explore in the next part, one of the joys of the Mind is it's very accessible for all ages.
Yeah.
James, going to the next level with the Mind, SkyTeam, and the Sound of Silence as a
it's all I can hear now.
as a theme and as a common element. I'm really struck with both of these games being A, cooperative games where everyone's playing to win together, and B, the way that the condition of silence is on all players. So we'll compare it with those games like charades, where it's one person is under this restriction and everyone else is trying to guess what they're doing. I've really found with both games that the more carefully and intentionally that you participate in playing the rule, the more fun it is. So much so that there are other rules in the Mind with lives and ninja stars that most people I've talked to about this game don't use those rules.
Yes, I think that I think you're absolutely right to bring that up. Certainly, when I was playing this game with my family, the thing that we most liked is silence as a really simple mechanism, and the lives and other things just added this kind of unnecessarily complexity that kind of took away from the elegance of silence. The fact that you had your card or your 2 cards or your 3 cards, depending on what round you're up to, and you had to figure out which when you should get in and play it. And if you were wrong, then that was it. You started all over again. And the more we practiced, the more we got into this hive mind, and that was enjoyable. And if you could use a life to get out of it, that kind of took away from the experience.
And when you first hear about the mind, for me, and the playing in silence, so it's initially it seems an antisocial or that's not part of what I gravitate to board games for, but it's actually the shared experience of respecting the rule.
Yes,
is fun.
Yeah,
which is important, and certainly with the mind, it feels creative and new when you first experience it. And some board game collectors get a hard time for being a bit drawn to what's new, but certainly what's unique or creative about a game is a pretty important element for me. And the mind really clicks. And similarly, Sky Team, when you play it and you play well together, and you do signal by the order in which you do things, you find a way to communicate without using words. There's a great satisfaction in both games when those things happen, and so much so that the noise of everyone succeeding is then a release. Well,
there's a few ways that I want to tap into what you've just said, Jarrod. Firstly, the kind of the shared experience thing I want to come back to in the third section of today's podcast, because I think ironically, or perhaps not so ironically, the mechanism of silence actually in some ways heightens the social aspect of it, and I want to talk a bit more about that later on.
Which is ironic for a podcast.
I kind of also wanted to respond to what you're saying about theme. You used hive mind, and in the past we've talked about, like, I can't remember whether we talked about this in our episode with Dominion, that sometimes the theme of a game can be very loosely associated with the mechanism. Like, when I play Dominion, I don't really feel like I'm in the world of Dominion. But with Sky Team and the Hive, I actually found the mechanism of silence heightened or really linked to the theme. So in Sky Team, you're landing a plane, and
you'd hope pilots are talking to each other
in
doing so.
But I found that silence actually made me feel anxious about making the right decision. Like, to me, it created an atmosphere of the high stakes that's involved in landing a craft, where you've got 200 people on board, and you want to make sure that you don't crash and kill them all. And that was kind of also heightened by, I actually played this game online, and people take it really seriously. So they get so people, if you're not the first game I played, I was a bit sketchy about the rules, and I perhaps didn't perform my best, and my partner wasn't very happy about. We crashed the plane after the third rounds, and I realised, having gone on and played a range of other games after that people take it really seriously, and obeying the rules, of being silent, of taking the kind of responsibility of safely landing the plane, and keeping the lives of all your people safe seriously. And I found silence really heightened that. And in the mind too, I found that you really did get into the idea of kind of being in sync with your fellow players. And we kind of went through, as a family, we kind of played it for a whole week, and we really kind of got into being able to kind of know or predict how other people were moving. So I found for me, the themes did really kind of stick more closely because of silence.
Interesting, because my initial reaction then, James, was they're doing the same thing with the theme and the mechanism, that there's a good theme mechanism overlap, that the satisfaction of a well executed turn when you've done it in silence has a particular joy. But from a setting perspective, the mind is pretty much an abstract game. There's not much we're all characters in this world, or
No.
something like Sky Team is very much all of the board game pieces, the little boards that our dice are rolled behind, the control panel that we're placing our dice on. It has the little coffee cups for when you're
you feel like you're in a kind of the cockpit. The complicated. This has the infrastructure. That's going on.
So the setting is important to the theme there in a way that for the mind. One of the joys of it, it's a small packet of cards. It's easy to take anywhere.
It's a small footprint for a game.
Yeah. But again, interesting that they're both cooperative, I think. And that's where there's games where you're playing in parallel and you can be in silence because we're both marking off our board in Welcome To, or we're both doing whatever we're doing in the games where we're kind of playing in parallel.
That comment, Jarrod, that they're both cooperative has reminded me something I wanted to ask earlier is silence actually part of a game that's not cooperative? Is silence as a mechanism unique to
co-op games?
Cooperative games? And I did think about this before today's podcast, and I was trying to think through. And maybe our listeners could tell us: is there a game, a competitive game out there where silence is important?
Is constitutive rather than contextual. Yeah, interesting.
So that was a question I had. Another similarity I had between the games is I thought that there was a countdown mechanism in both of them. Perhaps more so in Sky Team than the Mines, but let me explain what I mean by this, and you can tell me your thoughts, Jarrod. Firstly, in Sky Team, you have to land the plane in 7 rounds, and you need to do things in a certain order in order to get the plane there. And there's an added kind of element of you don't want the plane to crash into the planes in front of you. So there's some things that add pressure to it. And I guess in the Mind, there's also a countdown in that you have 10 rounds and you start with 1 card, and then when you succeed in that round you go to 2 cards. So there is a kind of a countdown in the way that the cards grow and become more complex. And I found that in both cases silence added to that, or in Sky Team, as you got closer to landing the plane, things become a bit, your decisions become a bit more of a pressure cooker. And in the Mind, as you go through each round, you get more cards, then it becomes harder as well. And the silence
kind of becomes harder and easier because you've got more. The more cards you have, ever so slightly, you've got a better sense of what other players have, because those 100 cards get reshuffled after each game.
Yes.
And when you've got 2 cards, it's a different game.
Yeah.
3, because you've got a bit more sense.
Yeah.
It's marginal, but it probably matters.
Yeah.
Or at least shapes the way you react.
Yeah.
I feel less of the time pressure in the Mind because I play it so casually.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy playing it where everyone ohms or hums or does something that lays their hands on the table. I think that's a really fun, campy thing to do, and is good play for me in engaging with it.
Well, that's kind of engaging in the theme, isn't it? In a fun way. That feels fun. Yeah.
Touching back on what you said before about playing the rules properly in Sky Team, I really notice it in Sky Team because just as in the Mind, the business of putting the cards on table in order is very simple. If without the restrictions.
Yeah.
Sky Team allows a bit of discussion after you've played your dice. And a few ways of communicating by pointing to the coffee cup. Are we going to use our adjust the dice number?
Yeah.
I find Sky Team is a bit puzzly in the way that some co-ops are. That you kind of have a prediction about how the machine of the game, the pieces are going to slide down. We're getting closer to the airport. And as you play each different variation, each game of Sky Team, you take on a different flight. Is it Montreal to New York? Is it London to Turkmenistan? you sort of have different challenges embedded in
Yeah.
that flight. So
Yeah.
there'll be more planes or there'll be bad weather. There's a bit of the mechanics of a co-op game that sometimes I find can become anticlimactic
Yeah.
as you work out the puzzle.
Yeah.
But so far for me, Sky Team still retains both the satisfaction of individual rounds well played
Yeah.
and achievement
Yeah.
as a pair.
Yeah. Something you said before, Jarrod, that I wanted to return to is the idea of limited communication, but the fact that you can communicate information in both games. So there's silence, but it's not as if you can't communicate information. So I found that when we played a lot of the mind, you learn to read other people around you. So
Are they leaning in? Are they leaning out?
yes,
Yep.
so you pay attention to their facial expressions, where they've got their hands, their general mood. So there is, and that I guess that's how I felt like the game did strongly reflect its theme. Like you kind of got there was a hive mind that operated, particularly when you played a lot of it. So you could communicate. What kind of cards you had by whether you kind of really had them close to your chest, so you kind of knew, oh, they must have very high cards, or whether you had your hand out straight away. And in the in Sky Team, one of the things I kind of realised, like trick taking, you kind of want to lead with certain dice in order to indicate what other kind of dice you might have. So you might go with your big number dice on your axis or your engine straight away so the other person knew that I've got this 6, I think it's a bit of an issue, and you can see if they can rise to the occasion and balance out the wings with another 6 or something like that. And of course, between rounds, you can talk, which I want to talk a bit more about later on, but you can communicate things, and silence kind of silence kind of makes you kind of think about those other ways of communicating in a game that you don't do so much in kind of when you're playing Ticket to Ride or Settlers or whatever, which don't really require that.
And maybe circumstances where if someone's gone quiet,
Yeah.
it might be time to stop. Welcome back to Duck Rabbit Goose, where, James, it's time to ask the question, so what? And I think for me, one of the so whats with Sky Team in the mind is how much the experience of doing something different in the gameplay is a big part of enjoying them. That there's lots of games with cards, lots of games with dice, but to be games where there's a really new novel use of communication restrictions that really jumped out for me when I played them both. That's one of the reasons why I was always interested to introduce people to them.
I think that is certainly game. It's so true that games feel fun to play when the mechanism feels fresh.
Even in this case where limited communication has been part of games in the past.
Yeah, and it certainly makes it much more fun when you're doing something novel rather than how many kind of resource acquiring games do we play where you feel like you're kind of going through the same kind of movements that you have in 3 other kind of resource management games.
Thing to get a thing.
Yeah. Whereas the silence makes it feel fresh.
And I do like how both of them are it's more than a novelty.
Yeah.
Whether it's the challenge of getting into a similar counting rhythm with the mind. I heard a project manager once talk about how it's something that he does with every new project team.
Yeah.
They play a few games of the mind.
Yeah.
As part of that day one exercise.
That is really interesting to me, Jarrod, because one of the things that I found about these two games is that silence far from kind of being antisocial, it really kind of emphasized the social element of game playing, and there's a few things.
And even online, being
yes,
your experience.
Yeah. And so there's a few things that I wanted to kind of share with you or get your comments about in this So What section. Firstly, I think silence made your individual decision making much more higher stakes or much more accountable.
Yep.
So I'm not typically a fan of cooperative games because I find often with cooperative games you each take on a role and you've all got a common objective, and when you can talk, it just ends up one person telling everyone else what to do.
It's called the quarterbacking problem.
Yeah, and so you actually never make a decision on your own. You just say, I've got this power, what should I do? And everyone else tells you what to do it. But when there's silence, you can't do that. So in when I was playing Sky Team, I often found myself, God, what am I going to do with the 5? Should I put it here or here or here? But rather than kind of just putting it out to the team, I had to make the decision myself, and that made it both more stressful but also ultimately more fun because I was genuinely making my own decision to contribute to the whole thing, and that is true to a lesser extent in the mind.
Oh, but I can see how it really plays out in Sky Team, where the captain and the co-captain do have things that only they can do.
Yeah.
So you're weighing up, well, this 5 will be useful for this shared function, whether it's the balance or the speed, or the your own coloured column.
So I could see how in a project management environment, like playing either of these games would be good as a way of getting people to actually really think through how they are an individual who's contributing to a group, not just mindlessly going along with what everyone says they should do.
Funnily enough, James, it's got me thinking about good meeting practice. Because there are roles in the meeting, but there's also unspoken expectations about how much silence, how much talking.
Yeah.
And what I think when you're talking about the decisions and owning them, one of the ways some co-op games get around the challenge of how to prevent quarterbacking, so it's a genuine collaborative experience of decision making, is to make it too complicated.
Yeah.
So a game like Spirit Island, which I quite like, but have sometimes felt, does it have the anticlimactic problem of once you've worked out and you've beaten the scenario, you have to play a few more rounds until you finally douse the last invader.
Yep.
Similar to Pandemic or Forbidden Island, the Forbidden Desert series, where that I feel it does well with a good amount of ramping up and tension.
Yep.
In these games, I felt they both used silence more as a pause and release mechanism. And in terms of the anticlimactic nature of Sky Team, because you're trying different scenarios, that feels less of a burden because the first time you get it to work, you've unpacked that puzzle.
Yeah.
If I could go to that step though, there's a lot. Sky Team's one of the modern games that has a lot of, and then you do this level, and then you do that level, and then you open this packet, and it introduces a new dice.
Yep.
I am struck by how rarely I've progressed games, and maybe it comes back to my observation before about being interested in creativity in games and trying something new.
Yep.
Versus sticking with a game long enough to level up.
Yeah. That's interesting. That kind of that reminds me of playing the Mind, and in the Mind, we only ever play the first 10 rounds when you kind of you put down cards in order, because if you progress past that, you need to do it. You do it backwards or something. There was some other way, but kind of where's the sweet spot for how much you enjoy engaging in a game, and are there all these other levels that game producers add to something that we actually never want to engage with?
I think Sky Team does do an interesting thing with connecting the components with the setting. I was wondering, James, like there's one of the mechanisms where you're not as in control. Every round you get closer.
Yep.
And your height drops.
Yep. Your altitude. Yep.
And the altitude is the one that's you don't control, and this distance is the one you do.
Yep.
So it must have been very tempting as a game designer to have the players control both.
Yeah.
And so in part, I think that was a good discipline from the designer.
Yeah.
Because you can rush to make it as realistic as possible.
Yep.
And I think they're actually sitting in an interesting place in terms of the uncanny valley of it being nearly but not quite the experience.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Sky Team thematic experience? Is it too close or not close enough or just right?
I think that I felt like it was just right, and one of the things I liked about it is that the co-pilot and pilot experience was similar enough that you knew that in a real plane that you would be making similar types of decisions, but it was also, there were some different things. And it was just the right amount of difference. You know, the co-pilot is in control of the wing flaps, and they need to do them in a certain order, whereas the pilot has the landing gear and they don't have to do them in any order. And that kind of little difference for me was kind of enough to evoke a sense of the difference between those two roles.
It makes the conversation and the planning, for want of a better word, of okay, so I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, and then we can deal with that later. That
comment you just said then, Jarrod, also reminded me that one of the things I found really interesting in these games as a cooperative experience is that between rounds or between hands, there's a lot of feedback. So because you played the round or the hands silently, you've got all these thoughts swirling around in your head, and as soon as the round or the hand is over, then there's a lot of feedback about, why didn't you play that card faster? Or you had an 8, you should have got that out straight away. Or for me, it was people often saying, why didn't you put that big number down in the engine or or whatever. And so the feedback became richer. And then there was an immediate chance to apply that feedback, because then you play the next round. And the teacher in me was really happy with that, because when you give a student feedback and they've got instant chance to apply that, that's really good. So silence kind of made the feedback more meaningful. I think.
So good. I've been reflecting as well on that experience with both games of comparing it with Dominion before, where I'm one of those people who does like to think out loud when I play Dominion, partly so I can keep track of what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing until I do it, what I'm thinking until I say it. Where this game, both of them invite a different kind of reflexive experience, which that's part of what we are wanting to explore in this podcast. I think is something like the idea of what a game says about its context, but what it says about the experience, whether you're a thinking aloud person or a reflect in silence person. Well, James, before we leave, is there anything we've forgotten?
There was one thing, Jarrod, that I meant to talk about at the start, and that was that it's really interesting to me that Sky Team winning the Spiel des Jahres back in 2024 is actually part of a recent trend of cooperative games winning that prestigious award. So more cooperative games have won in the last 10 years than the few decades before it combined. So Spiel des Jahres in 2024, Dorf Romantic the year before, last year Bomb Busters, which I haven't played, and people will know games like Just One, which won back in 2019, I think, and there's a few other games which I can't remember now. But a whole range of cooperative games, and that's interesting to me as a trend. Like, why have cooperative games become more of a hit in the last 10 years?
And there's certainly categories of of co-ops that are in that party family genre, and perhaps it's a lag from people looking for games they could play at home in the parlor game style.
Yeah, and riffing on what you talked about before in terms of novelty, cooperative games perhaps offer a fresher gameplay than kind of other mechanisms which have become a bit more formulaic, perhaps.
Interesting. And I think the other trend that's also been emerging, at least in hobby store games, is the solo gaming as well. So perhaps a themes for us to come back to in another episode there. Alternative titles we considered for this episode were Being Ourselves with Others and The John Cage Experience, which is a deep cut for the music fans. Honourable mentions, thinking about conditional communication and silence. A game like The Crew, I know you mentioned earlier, is a cooperative trick-taking game where sometimes there are specific additional communication restrictions as well as not talking about your hand.
Yep.
And that is certainly just one. I know you mentioned before, James, it's a good example of where the person in the position of the charade kind of role has to restrict what they can or what can be said to them. Are there honourable mentions in this category for you?
There is a game that's on the tip of my tongue. I think it's Maze, the one where you play in a shopping mall and you have to the characters need to escape.
Yes.
And you need to you have a certain movement that you can do, but you can't talk about it. You can only do the movement. So that's that kind of occurred to me over the last week, thinking about silence as a mechanism.
And there's a few kind of games where the silence is added to time pressure.
Yes.
So a few common threads there to finish up. If you've got a game that you think has an interesting theme and it might pair with another, or any other comments, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We welcome you joining in further on the platform that you've listened to this podcast. Otherwise, we'll finish up there and look forward to our next episode.